All right, welcome back to Social Media for News Organizations. This is Dr. T to talk about the platforms that we will use in this class. Let's start out with Twitter. Everybody loves Twitter when they work in this class. It's a very easy tool to use once you get used to it, if you're not used to it already. If you've used it before, it's very comfortable as well. I'm going to have you using it as a journalist, though, so even if you're a heavy Twitter user, as some of you are, this is definitely a different way of using the platform. Going out and finding stories and sharing them on Twitter and interacting with people on Twitter might not be something you're necessarily comfortable with, but you will be by the time this course is over. As you can see from the screenshot right here, we have TweetDeck. There is a TweetDeck demo on Blackboard. There will be by the end of this week before we start our social NNN shifts. So go check that out so you can see how to use TweetDeck effectively. I strongly suggest you use it for both your social NNN shifts and your personal tweeting. All right, so here are the top Twitter tips that I have for the class. Notice that number 1 is in all caps and has an exclamation point. Engage. I think it's absolutely critical that we are engaging our audience. You need to listen and seek out conversations. So engaging your audience doesn't mean just waiting around until somebody @replies us. It means going and finding conversations and @replying them. I know that's awkward at first, but I also know that it's really important that we actually use Twitter the way that other people use Twitter. And if we're not engaging people, it's not social media. It's just media. And too many journalists completely fail at this. So I really want to push the idea so that you should be engaging people, especially on Twitter. Number 2, don't use the headlines that come with the stories as your tweets. That will be very tempting. So if you hit the tweet this button or whatever on a story, it's just going to pull in the headline. If you copy and paste it, it's just going to pull in the headline as well. If you retweet, it's just going to use the headline. Try to write your own headlines for these. This is a really good exercise for you on how to write a really sharp, good headline, which happens to be a tweet. Write like you're talking to a friend, but with your boss or me, your professor, over your shoulder. That is the way you have an interesting tone to what you do on Twitter, and the more relaxed you are, the better you're going to be, the more engagement you're going to have, and the more fun you'll have with this. If you're thinking you're just supposed to be writing headlines that would appear on a page of one of the New York Times or on the header of a popular website, you're going to be kind of doing it wrong. This is definitely a different media, and we should treat it that way. Think about the types of tweets that kind of catch your attention and try and model your tweets off that same type of approach. Number 4, use TweetDeck for this class. As I said, I just want to reiterate that. It's really a strong tool, allows you to follow different conversations in different columns. Check out the demo on that in Blackboard. So number 5, non-@reply posts should be spaced out about every 10 to 15 minutes. And so you can tweet more often than you can post on Facebook, let's say, without annoying your followers, because for the most part, people do follow a lot of other accounts. So if the stream goes by quickly, they won't even notice if you're kind of overloading their account. But still try to space them a bit. That changes if there's breaking news. So if there's breaking news, you can definitely update more often. Or if you just find a really good story 2 minutes apart or something like that, that's okay. But generally, you want to try to space them out a little bit. Now, notice I say non-@reply posts. You can @reply all day long. In fact, I encourage you to. You could @reply every 5 seconds. I think that's great. I want you to be super engaged. You won't be annoying people with those because the only people who see @replies generally are people who follow both your account and the person you're @replying. So you sound like you're going to be populating their stream with a bunch of conversation unless that they happen to both to follow both of those things. But even in that case, I don't think they'll mind that much. Number 6, use Twitter lists. They integrate really well with TweetDeck. A Twitter list is easy to create. There's a section on that in the TweetDeck demo. So I suggest you check that out and maybe even create some of those lists for your own personal Twitter account. Okay, so a couple more tips. Answer everyone who @replies you, even if they just say, hey, I really like that story. Don't just let that go. Say thanks, and it doesn't seem like that's a big deal, but the more interactive you are, the more they realize that it's a person behind the account. and the more likely they are to stay following us and engage in our content and actually read what we're putting out there. Be super, super conversational and engaging, unless they are a troll. And there are trolls out there, people who are just trying to get under your skin. And if they're trying to do that, then ignore them. And it's better to ignore them than to get into it into a Twitter fight. So do not get into any Twitter fights, whether you're doing it for your personal account or for Social NN, or sometime in the future. I think whenever you get into a fight, you just look worse. So let the troll have his day and move on. Number 8, be super helpful and useful. Journalists have always been helpful and useful, at least I hope so, with social media. We're able to be interactive on Thursday at 4:56 in the morning and helpful, so that's a really good thing. Retweet in moderation. It's going to be tempting just to hit that retweet button, but if you're just filling your stream up with retweets, it's not very engaging. It's not very interesting, and it's not really fulfilling the mission of this class to try and engage people. Don't use retweets all the time, but once in a while is okay. What you'd want to do is, if you're going to retweet something, then add to it. Join the conversation. Pull something out. Read the article, and then maybe ask a question about it, something like that. Number 10, journalists are fair, accurate, and honest on social media. At least we're supposed to be. Well, on any media, of course, especially social media, as you're going to see that there's people who do not follow those tenets. So it's important that you do. That's what separates a journalist out from just your average Twitter user. That and the fact that we actually verify the information is correct. Number 11, be very transparent on your own personal account. You should probably fill out your bio to say a little bit about yourself and that you're a journalism student or whatever you are, to make it clear that you're not just some average Joe. And also, don't ever use anonymous Twitter accounts to basically go attack people or say the things that you wish you could say. Always be clear with who you are and why you were saying what you were saying. Also, unlock your accounts. I know that some of you have locked accounts, so when you come into this semester, you're going to have it unlocked, at least for the semester. I strongly suggest that you have it unlocked all the time and then just block people who annoy you. But you should have it unlocked because we're journalists and Twitter is an open platform, so we should be showing off basically what our thoughts are and what we had to say about the news. All right, let's talk about Facebook for a little bit. They have more than 1 billion active users, so it can't be wrong, right? However, I gotta say that Facebook's actually kind of difficult to use as a media platform in some ways. As much as it is so popular and draws so much traffic to our sites, it's also difficult to control. And by that I mean people don't generally go to official Facebook pages to get news. Instead, they share a link on their own personal site. Their family sees it, their friends see it and share it around, that kind of thing. So a lot of traffic comes from Facebook, but doesn't actually come from a social media editor posting something on Facebook. However, we do have to give it a shot, see if we can find something that goes viral, and try and kind of boost traffic that way. So here are my tips for Facebook. This is a very personal medium, and we were intruding on people's family and friends, so you have to be very, very careful about the tone and about how often you post and that kind of thing so that you don't overwhelm them. Putting content before a link is not only useful, I think it's probably critical. So you don't want to just share a link. You want to put something at the top. Maybe it's a quote from the story. Maybe it's an interesting part of the story, something like that. Number 3, asking questions will draw responses, but you really can overdo this. And I've seen people overdo this all over the place, where they ask just a question at the end of every single Facebook post. Don't do that. It just gets annoying. It looks like you're kind of desperate for somebody to comment on things. And with our relatively small following on our Facebook pages, you're not going to get a ton of interaction. You should be interacting with others when you're not working for your Facebook shifts. Maybe you could interact with a person who is working on Facebook. That would be really nice. Other than that, you're not going to get a ton. So don't ask a bunch of questions. It'll look kind of weird. And when I say interact with people working on Facebook, I mean interact with your classmates. When you're not working, interact with them, talk to them, and maybe share that yourself on your own personal page. Facebook has a very clear that anything with a photo or video is going to be better than just a text post. I strongly suggest that you do that. It's probably because that's what people are more likely to click on. But I also believe that Facebook's algorithm, which is kind of what they show in the newsfeed, as you notice, probably they don't show necessarily everything, is geared heavily toward allowing things that images to the right to the top. Definitely look for a good photo or video to go with each story if you can. Number 5, post new content no more than once per hour. This is generally, of course, if something big is going on, you can post a little bit more on that, but you don't want to post that much. That's why I put another platform with Facebook, in this case Instagram, to give you something to do. Generally, you're going to want to post kind of early on in your shift and get on Snap and get on Instagram and start working your Instagram shift for the rest of the hour, because you're just not going to do a whole lot on Facebook other than that one post and then trying to interact with other people. Number 6, you can jump into the comments section and spark a conversation. If somebody does reply, you want to reply right away and say something to them. If somebody commented on an earlier post from a shift you weren't working, you should jump in there and be a responsive person anyway, even if it wasn't your post. Next one, don't schedule updates. And this goes for Twitter or any other social media platform that allows you to schedule updates. I know a lot of companies do this. I just don't agree with it. I don't think it's a good idea to schedule out things that have them kind of pop up randomly. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, if breaking news happens, it looks ridiculous when a news organization is spitting out automatic headlines about something really soft or something featuring. Also, it can be a signal to your followers that there's not really a person there. It's kind of obvious when things are being pushed out like that. Third, I think that it just makes us harder for us to be interactive with our audience. If we're setting it and forgetting it, we'll truly set it and forget it. We're not going to be there to interact. I really think of social media as almost like a radio call-in show, and that you're trying to actually have this conversation with your community and you want to hear from them and you want to engage and talk with them. And the more you think of it that way, the better you're going to do. Don't give away too much of your Facebook on your Facebook page, so try to balance it. You don't want to give the whole story in the caption above the link, for example, but just something that will make them interested in going there without being too clickbaity would be good. For those of you who watch television news, it's kind of like a tease before a commercial break. You just want to kind of hook their attention, give them one fact or something. Next, you should and you can open your personal profile to subscriptions, which allow pretty much anyone to follow you, like on Twitter. But that's had a spam problem in the past, so you may not want to do that. But it's a cool thing to experiment with and see what happens. Mine is open, and I don't get a whole lot of spam, but I've heard other people say it's been much worse. So an idea that you could do with Facebook is to post original photo galleries from events. So go out and just shoot a whole bunch of pictures and then ask readers to tag themselves on Facebook itself. So they could go through and tag themselves, and that basically adds a whole bunch of new people to your page as far as knowing that you exist and probably following your page. So that's just an interesting idea to try. And it's an interesting idea to pair with Instagram because you are already out there taking a bunch of pictures. So the mobile app for personal use is just not good at managing pages in the way of a professional kind of news outlet. There is a Pages app for Facebook. It's also kind of lame. But generally, desktop for managing our pages on Facebook is the best. If you're going to try to do it all on your mobile, you're going to have a really hard time. So let's move on into Instagram, which is an interesting platform that is used really intensely by a relatively small portion of the population. And I know that population is kind of growing up, and you guys might be a part of it. But it's an interesting thing to give it a shot as a journalist. And here's why I think that. If you're going to get through the first couple of shifts, and you could be like, what am I doing? Why am I sharing this news on Instagram? How do I do this? That's kind of the point. I want you to kind of learn how to use these things in ways that they're not meant to necessarily be used. I want you to just be thinking that way. My goal is not necessarily to make you an expert news kind of journalist on Instagram, but to make you a critical thinker who can figure out how to use a platform, whatever next platform comes along, in a way for media. So here are some tips from me on Instagram. Number one, regardless of the subject, it always comes down to telling good stories. It may seem like it's difficult to tell stories using just pictures, but people have been doing it for years. Look at slideshows. Look at the way that you were presented with photos in a photo class, or even just looking through pictures on Instagram. You can tell what people are doing. We just have to figure out a better way to tell a story in a journalistic sense. Number 2, in order to do this, don't limit yourself to one photo. I know that there are a lot of people that use Instagram that will take the time to edit a specific photo and just make it look nice and crisp and clean. That's great, and I don't discourage that, but don't limit yourself to just one photo. Make sure that you're including multiple photos, almost creating like a photo essay or a photo slideshow. Number 3, change up the background. Don't always take the same pictures in the same place. And if you're taking multiple pictures in one location, make sure that you're using multiple backgrounds. Make sure that you're flipping around, getting different perspectives, that kind of thing. Number 4, find and use a lot of color. That is what really kind of attracts people's attention to photos on Instagram. If there's a lot of color, that picture really, really stands out. So go ahead and focus on finding and using more color. And playing with different perspectives, number 5. Get down on your knees, get up above, try different angles, try different perspectives that might trigger somebody's creativity and interest. Natural lighting is king. You don't want to be taking a bunch of pictures inside a poorly lit room or a room that has like really yellow light or even really blue fluorescent light. So get outside, take pictures with natural light, get into a room that has a lot of windows, that kind of thing. There's no replacing good lighting when it comes to taking photos, especially for Instagram. Follow the rule of thirds. If you don't know what that is, basically if you were to chop your screen into thirds, both horizontally and vertically, it's those happy spots in the X's, either in the top right, top left, bottom right, or bottom left corner, where those thirds intersect, that you want to have the focus of the photo. Number 8, stick with a theme. Remember who your audience is and why they're coming to you. Please don't be taking a bunch of pictures of some sports-related thing if you're covering entertainment. Don't be covering entertainment if you're in a sports section. If you're doing SNN for sports, stick with the same theme. Stick with the same kind of filter. I know that I joked about filters on the first slide for Instagram, but to be completely honest, if you can keep the same look throughout, then people know what to expect. People know what they're looking for and what they're going to get when they come to your page or go through your photos. Don't be afraid to play with video. Video is, in my opinion, king because it can convey so much information in such a quick, short period of time. So don't be afraid to play with video. I know video is not the most common thing on Instagram, but it's not a bad thing to play with. It's not a bad thing to use, so go ahead and play with that. And then quality over quantity. You do definitely want to make sure that you're not putting up every single photo that you take at a specific event that you go to. Use the best ones. Be selective because people don't want to see 30 photos if 7 will tell the story. So do be selective. Make sure that what you're taking is quality, that you're following the rule of thirds, that you've got that natural lighting, that you're using a lot of color, different backgrounds, but that you are giving the audience quality images. Okay, so we do use Snapchat in this class for news, which I think is actually a lot of fun. There's a lot of opportunity for people to experiment and explore and do different things. There's everywhere from NPR to the Washington Post to the New York Times to ESPN to MTV using Snapchat to tell little stories. And I think it's a really good medium for telling those stories, especially for this generation of consumers that really just looks for the headlines. They look for the short, quick story that can give them the information that they want, and then they can move on. So this should be a lot of fun for you guys. So here are my tips for Snapchat. It still just comes down to telling stories. If you use Snapchat in a certain way, and so you're trying to think, how would I possibly use this for news? Just realize that it's really just about telling stories. And on your own personal Snapchat, often if you use a story feature, you're telling little stories about yourself. So what we want to do is turn that on its head and tell stories about the community as much as possible. So go out into the community, find someone that you can interview, find a story that you can tell, a series of little quick videos in Snapchat or photos. Can really, really be effective. So number 2, that means you're going to have to get out of your dorm, out of your house, out of your apartment, wherever you may live, and actually go talk to people and take videos of them and take photos and try to think of something that's somewhat noteworthy or entertainment worthy or sports worthy to share on our Snapchat accounts. Even something that's just novel. I mean, there are the different newsworthy classifications. You have timeliness, proximity, prominence, those types of things. Novelty is one of those. Conflict is another. So look for those types of stories and tell those stories. You should use emoji and filters. Have some fun with this. Don't feel too stiff. Don't do it like NPR. They are a little stiff that way. Feel like a college publication. This is our audience. Have a good time. Try to avoid the dog filter, though. Not a huge fan of that one in a professional environment, even if we are a college publication. If you do use photos, set the timer for at least 6 seconds. I've noticed some news organizations have left it at a default 3 seconds, and the caption goes by so fast, and the photo goes by so fast, I don't even necessarily even see what they're trying to share or what they're trying to say. So I would say at least 6 seconds. You could do longer if you want, even the infinity, so that people have a chance to read that before they click to move on to the next snap. One thing that's kind of fun is to introduce yourself at the start of a story. So a little selfie video of you saying, "Hi, my name is Dr. T here for Social NN. I'm going to be talking about the weather today, or I'm going to be taking you on a tour through the museum, or I'm going to be interviewing so-and-so, the curator for this exhibit." Something like that. It's kind of a fun thing to do. Our story is going to change hour by hour. Different people get on and different people take Snapchat over. I mean, if you want, you can try to follow the storyline that someone else put in there. But if you can't do that, you can come up with your own storyline. I think that's okay to switch gears. However, when you introduce yourself, you might want to say, "Here's what I'm going to talk about," and give us kind of a preview of what's coming up. Again, have some fun with it. Remember who your audience is. Your audience is going to want fun. They're not going to want boring. Of course, that should be true with any audience. So keep that in mind as you're working on Snapchat. All right, so those are my tips and the conversation on the platforms that we're using in this class. Go ahead and take the quiz on Blackboard, and I will talk to you next time.